911.
Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense.
Okay, where are you at?
I'm at 12 Meadow Lane, Highland Heights, Kentucky. Ma'am, I killed him in self-defense.
Okay. Hold on. What did you kill him with?
A loaded gun in the house.
Where are you?
I'm standing about 10 feet from his dead body.
Okay, are you sure that he is dead?
He's dead, ma'am. He's completely dead.
Okay, and is this your gun?
No, this is his gun. He keeps loaded guns in the house.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Shana Michelle Huber. I can hear myself echoing in the background, ma'am.
It's just the phone system. The phone system has got a delay.
Are they going to arrest me?
Ma'am, I don't know what they'll do. We're going to send him out.
I mean, I'm not a murderer, ma'am. I just killed him.
What happened exactly? What happened?
He beat me and tried to carry me out of the house, and I came back in to get my things, and he was right in front of me, and he reached down and grabbed the gun, and I grabbed it out of his hand and pulled the trigger, and I killed him.
Okay, have you had a history of domestic violence with him?
Yes. I was just very frightened. He's a lot bigger than me. And then because he was twitching and I knew he was going to die anyway, and he was making funny noises, I shot him a couple more times just to kill him. Because I knew he would have been.
I'm sorry, you said you shot him a couple more times after that?
Yeah.
How many times did you shoot him total?
I don't know. Enough to make sure he was dead. Because he was twitching so bad, I didn't want to watch him lay there and twitch.
So you shot him instead of calling 911?
Yeah, I did, because I knew he was going to die anyway.
Hubers has called 911 to report her deceased boyfriend and that she has killed him. But what she's also offering the dispatcher is a level of detail about how she killed him and a distancing from any aspect of him that's human. She's referring to him as a dead body. She's automatically telling the dispatcher she did this in self-defense. And that's a little unusual. The majority of people would make the decision to get help if somebody was shot accidentally. Your first thought is not to finish the job.
You want something to drink? You want some water? Okay, yeah, I need you some water, Doc. Go ahead and sit down. You're fine. All right? You're fine. I'll shut this. I'll give you some water. I'll be with you in just a second. You're fine.
It's very unusual that she whimpers, seems distraught for the first couple of seconds, but then almost like she switches off and it's a completely different person. She changes her demeanor as soon as the detective leaves the room. That would not be typical of someone who just killed her boyfriend and who's completely overwhelmed at having done such a horrific thing.
I have to read you what's called your rights, okay? Your Miranda rights. It protects you, it protects me, okay?
Yeah. I really want to have an attorney present.
Okay, do you have an attorney?
My parents could get me one.
Okay, what was his name?
The man that I killed, Ryan Carter Poston. What am I doing tonight? Am I getting to go home?
I have the foggiest at this point. I've just still got to talk to a couple other people, okay?
I honestly, shot the man in self-defense.
Well, that's the kind of questions I was going to ask. When you make the statements, that's fine. But I can't ask you any questions because you want an attorney.
Well, if I waive my right to just speak and not have an attorney today, could that prevent me from going to jail tonight?
I can't promise you anything, okay?
Psychopaths, because of their lack of empathy, essentially they're at the center of their universe. Everyone else around is for their pleasure or should be eliminated because they're some kind of roadblock to what they want to get. And what we see here is already evidence of that. I think she's fully aware that she's killed somebody. She thinks she's smarter. She thinks she should get away with it. She should not be held accountable. I should be able to walk out tonight and be done. Isn't that right? And when it turns out not to be true, that's when things start to unravel.
I really love him. And it's just really messed up that we had to get into a physical fight and that this had to happen, you know? And if I could go back and do all over again, I would rather have my head beat into the coffee table. I know that sounds so bad, but he was so abusive to me that all those feelings are like, it's like, I feel really bad about it because I really loved him. But he was so abusive to me today and in the recent past that it's like, I feel like that's evil of me in my heart.
It's important to realize that she's already asked for a lawyer, and yet Hubers can't seem to stop talking. Her need to manage impressions and to push forward her narrative is really what's taken over.
Hubers felt relief because she had enough. And that's very consistent with the psychopath. Good psychopaths learn how to mimic genuine human emotion, attraction, compassion, love, anger, resentment. And what we're seeing here is her attempt to do that.
I remember more details and more of the nasty things he said, and him shutting me in the door, shutting my arm in the door, even at the floor, and taking me out and throwing me against the bookshelf. That's when he started screaming all the nasty things at me. You're a hillbilly. Everyone knows you're crazy. I remember now that he drew me into the TV, the big screen.
She's setting up the story now in even more detail, saying, I'm remembering things. Whether it's her arm shutting the door, whether she's thrown against the bookshelf, whether she's smashed her head into the TV set. But at the scene, the bookshelf is undisturbed. Things are still in immaculate order on the shelf. There's no crack in the screen. She doesn't have any bruises, doesn't have any marks on her. So what she's saying doesn't match the physical reality.
He put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs. Hillbilly. I hate you. I hate your Eastern Kentucky accent. I hate your mother. I hate you. I hate everything about you for what you are. I remember screaming, reaching up to grab his shirt. You mocked my family, my mother, and my family.
And what's interesting in this segment of the interrogation is she really moves away from any physical abuse and essentially describes a motive for killing him. He was insulting her and her family. How dare he? Odd to say, but psychopaths are usually very sensitive people too. In many cases, their behavior, their demeanor is born out of a self-esteem which is very fragile, which is very sensitive to a perceived insult. And what happens once the psychopath feels insulted in any way is a catastrophic reaction of rage.
And he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it. And I couldn't, I let him, I still, even though it hurt, I still loved him. But I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I walked around, you know. And I think that's when I shot him in the head. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I shot him right here. I gave him his nose job he wanted.
She wasn't going to give him up to anybody else. If she shot him in the face, that's a very personalized way of killing someone. She could have shot him in the chest or the heart. That might be sentimental, but she shot him in the face. And she was angry, and she was going to pay him back. And I think shooting him in the face was deliberate. Yeah, I don't think it was an accident.
I shot him probably 6 times. Shot him in the head. He fell onto the ground. He was like laying like this. He was twitching some more. I shot him a couple more times just to make sure he was dead. Because I didn't want to watch him die. I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me. They know that I killed a boyfriend in self-defense. Not funny, but he wasn't a good person. And I know that I'm the one that's here and he's not. But the caliber of person that I am is like supersedes him on so many levels. And everyone knows it. I don't blame myself, though. I blame the way that he treated me today. The only good thing is that he can't mistreat me anymore. Even if I suffer dearly for it, I can't be hurt anymore. That feels really good. You know?
That line, I wonder if anyone will want to marry me. It's not the usual line people have when they're being detained after having shot someone. So from a psychological standpoint, we have to take it as a significant indicator of what's seriously important to her. I'd really want to know how long this has been an obsession. If Ryan was saying, no, I'm not marrying you, I'm moving on to other people, he's thwarting that fantasy. And now that he's gone, she's wondering, well, I wonder if there'll be another prospect, which means that the idea of being married is much more important than who she's going to marry.
I'm gonna... Okay, thanks. Yep. Third death penalty in Kentucky. Third. What are they gonna do with me?
I don't know. They just told me to come here and sit with you. Did you have enough to drink?
Were you one of the officers at the scene? See, I walked a lot. I don't really remember. Did you go in and look at his body?
Not yet.
Is it still laying there?
I don't know, ma'am. They just told me to come and sit. I'm just here to sit with you, ma'am. You're talking to the wrong person. Okay?
Should I have let him hurt me? Should I have taken a chance? Can I talk to Amber?
She's coming back in a little bit. Yeah.
The narcissism that Hubers struggles with is really seen here because she doesn't have an audience. It's difficult to engage in impression management if nobody's paying attention to you. And essentially, this officer's not paying attention to Hubers. And what she does is she doesn't tolerate it. She pretty rapidly asks to have Amber brought back in. And Amber is this female officer who somehow Hubers has fused with and believes might be her best shot at convincing them that this was self-defense.
Oh, man. I did. Yes, I did. I can't believe I did that. Kill him. Kill him. He murdered.
Who sings to themselves after they've killed somebody? This is like she's finally grabbed the brass ring. She's almost surprised at herself that she was able to succeed. She refers to herself in the third person. We all have parts in ourselves, right? The part that is wife or husband or father or daughter or is all a little bit different. Sometimes psychopaths don't integrate these parts so well. So in order to get through their daily life, they have to split apart parts of themselves and sort of put them in a box and only let them out when the opportune time arises. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is her saying to herself, I'm a killer.
I don't even know what to do right now. I can only imagine what's going through these people's heads. You just can't you can't treat somebody like that. You can't push somebody around the room. You can't throw somebody into the ground. I probably have rug burns. I was thinking about that. Okay. I probably have rug burns. I don't know if I can find any. I did have my clothes on. And like, I don't have any marks, but I was thrown around the room. I probably do on my legs, actually. I was thinking about that. I probably do have some bruises. What about that? My shoulder hurt. I think he grabbed me by the shoulder. I'm a bit panicked now. Maybe I'll have to remember.
As time has gone on and Hubers is sitting in this room waiting to be released, what's likely happening is she's playing back things that she has said to the dispatcher and to the case agent about how things happened. And she's starting to realize the crime scene might not look like that. My body doesn't look like that, like there was a struggle. She starts to play back things she said and tries to plug in holes and gaps. And when Hubers says he isn't alive to remember, what she might be telling us is he's not alive to testify against me.
I am really not a bad person. I think anybody who knows me knows that. I mean, look at me. Like, I'm motivated, I'm educated, I love people. My degree is in counseling psychology. I want to help people. I just don't feel like this is what I did with you that wrong.
A woman is behind bars tonight. Shayna Hubers is charged with the murder of her boyfriend. Highland Heights police responded to the report of a person shot at 12 Meadow Lane last night around 9. That's when they found the victim, Ryan Poston. The 29-year-old had been shot and killed. Still, no word on a possible motive.
I wanted to kill myself. But that's not gonna help anything. You know? I'd rather be alive. I'd rather be alive. And I'd rather be alive and incarcerated. My grandma always told me you commit suicide. Do you believe in God? I hate him so strongly for the way that he spoke to me, for the things that he was doing. Can I call my mother? I'll go ask him. Okay, could you ask that for me? Hold on just a second.
We can see her start to play every card she can with this female law enforcement agent. So she invokes a God. She invokes the mother card. She starts to pull at all of the possible heartstrings, in her mind thinking, this is happening, you know, this is working, I'm effective. And as soon as the officer leaves the room, she compliments herself on what a phenomenal acting job she's just done. And that's truly remarkable, truly cold-blooded.
I feel bad for his family. Like, I feel bad for his sister, you know, 9/11. Like, I genuinely feel terrible for the family. I feel awful. I don't think I should ever have to talk to them about it, though. I don't think that I should ever have to say anything to them. I don't think I owe anybody that. Who cares for him? Love can turn to hate so quick.
When she says love can turn to hate real quick, I believe she's being absolutely correct, that she could be really loving in one moment, and once she finally heard no, that she becomes enraged and hates intensely. We know that people with psychopathy don't regulate the emotions in the same way that healthy people do. As we mature in life, we gain in that ability to modulate our emotions. And in psychopathy, that's a feature that doesn't really develop. They flip from one state immediately to the other.
I just feel like more emotions than I've ever felt at one time. You know? Have you ever had something happen to you where you felt all these emotions at once? You don't even know which one to pick out of the jar. Part of me, there's a part of me that's very proud. You know? Like, I think that I hate men enough now, after I've been abused, that I think I can be okay, you know, being me. And if I get out of, if I don't get any serious consequences, then I could really be happy just having a career and maybe not even ever getting married. Because this is very traumatic. You know, it's very traumatic for me to live with it.
Huber's confusion around her emotions and not knowing which ones to pick out of a jar may be a little window into the fact that she has enough awareness to know that she doesn't experience emotions the way the rest of us do. And what she's really telling us is that she's having a hard time figuring out which emotions she's supposed to mimic.
So she's now developing the story about she has maybe PTSD. So she's kind of a heroic survivor of all the abuse. She is acting. This is a performance for her. She doesn't really care about the fact that Ryan is dead. So there's no genuine grief. And she approves of herself really highly. And she's given herself a pat on the back. She's kind of quite proud of herself.
Here's what's going to happen right now, Shayna. Okay, with everything that we have, I'm gonna have to charge you with murder. Okay, right now. And
right now?
Yeah. Well, we got until you go to court and stuff, and they decide what they're going to do with it. Okay. But what we're going to do is we'll do a search warrant.
What degree?
Murder. There's no degree.
She would not let the relationship end. He was trying to end the relationship many times, and he was a little too nice about it because he never really wanted to hurt her feelings. He said to me, "This is getting to be restraining order level crazy. I'm not kidding. You need to talk to her." She sent me 75 texts in the last hour.
On the stand, lead investigator Bill Birkenhauer painted Shayna Hubers as a jilted girlfriend who could not let go. Birkenhauer retrieved about 20 to 30,000 pages of information from Shayna Hubers and Ryan Poston's phone in the last 8 months before his death. The data detailed an on-again, off-again relationship with Hubers, sending 50 messages for every one that Poston returned.
What does she say to her friend right after she calls Ryan Poston an evil person?
She says when she goes to the shooting range with Ryan tonight, she wants to turn around, shoot and kill him, and play like it's an accident.
It becomes pretty clear at trial, through the testimony of multiple witnesses, that her story, her description of the events, of the quality and nature of their relationship, had actually nothing to do with reality. In fact, this was a situation where she wanted to pursue a relationship, he did not. And she, like a psychopath would, had the thought, well, if I can't have him, nobody will. And how dare he not want me?
At Huber's trial, what starts to emerge is a pattern of behavior where Hubers wasn't respecting Ryan's boundaries. Hubers was bombarding him with text messages, somewhere along the lines of 50 messages to every one of his own. She was engaging in behavior that, if the genders, I think, were reversed, and it was a male engaging in this behavior with a female, we would be much faster as society to label that as stalking, as harassment. But because she is this damsel in distress, young female who is soft-spoken and she's pretty, nobody really labeled it that way until we had a dead person.
I told him to make sure that he was kind to Shayna and that he told her honestly what was going on so that she didn't find out later that he was out with someone else.
That someone was Audrey Bolte, Miss Ohio 2012.
When Hubers found out that he was going to go out on a date with a former beauty queen, that became the straw that broke the camel's back. That was a point she could not let happen. Because once he did that, that meant that their relationship was over. Huber's fragile ego could not tolerate that, and she then went into action. Because as far as she's concerned, he's an object, and he belongs to her.
Did she ever at times laugh about certain parts of the incident that happened on October 12th of 2012?
Yes.
Which parts did she laugh about?
Thing about shooting him in the face and giving him a nose job he always wanted. She said she was going to plead insanity, but then she said that she was too smart because she has an IQ of Einstein, up to the IQ of Einstein, and so she's going to plead the white battle syndrome.
A local breaking news alert now. Shayna Hubers has been found guilty of murder.
Convicted killer Shayna Hubers won't be sentenced until June, but right now her lawyers are trying to get her a shorter prison sentence. They are asking the judge to declare Hubers a domestic violence victim, saying she was abused during her relationship with Ryan Poston. Now, if the judge rules in her favor, she could be eligible for parole in just 5.5 years.
Now that Hubers has been convicted, her legal team is trying to get the court to acknowledge that she be handled as a special victim or a special circumstance, that she was in fact the victim of domestic violence, and that this is a battered women's syndrome case or a battered victims case.
She needs to represent herself as having been in a long-standing relationship that was stable, they were together, they're living together, and that she is the victim of a history of abuse over time. The challenge for her will be, it's going to have to match evidence.
What did you tell the police officer when he asked you specifically, is that your residence?
I don't live with him.
If you would flip that over, is that list of 10 guys on that page?
Sure, I may have slept with 10 guys in 2012, but I don't see how that's relevant to any of this.
Well, luckily that's not up to you.
Keep a civil tongue in your head, number one. And just answer the questions, all right?
When they start looking at the facts, it turns out They're not living together. It's not her house. They're not in a monogamous relationship. He's dating other people. She's been seeing other men. He's been saying, it's over, move on. And she's been refusing to accept that.
What I think happened in that apartment was little more than cold-blooded murder. It's probably as cold-blooded an act as I've been associated with in the criminal justice system in the 30-plus years I've been in it.
Good evening, everyone. A young woman convicted of killing her on and off again boyfriend will get a new shot at freedom.
And it's all because one juror didn't pay child support more than 2 decades ago.
Kentucky law says you cannot serve on a jury if you are a convicted felon.
Okay, so here we are. Thanks again for making time for us. So the big question, it appears that you've fallen in love.
Yes. If you would have asked me 5, 6 years ago, am I straight, am I bisexual, am I lesbian, I would have said I'm a, heterosexual woman. But things happen in your life, and what I feel for Unique is real, and I don't have a doubt about that in my mind. And that's all we're doing here, is exercising our First Amendment right to become married.
I have the affidavit that shows May 2nd as your request to get a marriage license. Have you heard back from anyone yet?
We have not, and in my opinion, I feel like we're being spun already, and I feel as if I've already been retaliated against, so.
Even if it's only been 7 days?
Yes. I feel as if our constitutional First Amendment right to marry, because Unique is biologically a male and I'm a woman, are being violated and we're being retaliated against due to my high-profile case and, my name in Cincinnati.
Some may say this is more of either a publicity stunt or something to derail your second trial.
This is no stunt. We actually genuinely love each other. I love Richie, Unique, Richard, Devon McVie, Junior. And to me, it's nothing but real. It's nothing but genuine love that we feel for one another. And he would tell you the same. I have a deeper connection with him than I've ever had with anyone in my life, of the opposite sex or same sex. That doesn't matter to me. And this is no kind of joke.
Huber's belief that 7 days of waiting to hear from the Department of Corrections if her marriage will be approved is somehow them retaliating against her just speaks to that sense of entitlement that the rules don't apply to her. Huber's is trying to get the audience to believe that she has this deep love for Unique Taylor, who happens to be transgendered. She still refers to her partner as he. Huber's is not even using the correct pronoun about her partner who she wants to marry. And so the fact that Huber's continues to maintain that it doesn't matter to her indicates to us she really hasn't changed.
How are you different than October 2012?
I think I've grown up a lot. I think I've been through a lot. And I think I was a young girl then, and I think I'm a woman now.
You taking the stand then during this trial?
I'll leave that up to, I'll make that a surprise. We'll put that into surprise.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
When Huber's is asked by the journalist whether she intends to testify in this retrial, What she says is, we'll make it a surprise. So she has kind of this glib, lighthearted attitude about what is about to be a murder trial. And she kind of handles this like a press conference, and like she's celebrity status and everyone wants to know. And so she's gonna leave it as a cliffhanger for the viewers. Nowhere in this interview that Hubers has with the media does she show any signs of remorse, nor does she show any consideration for how Ryan's family is going to be re-traumatized and re-victimized, having to sit through this trial all over again.
A big surprise in court today as a woman accused of murdering her former boyfriend takes the stand to tell her side of the story today.
I played in the marching band. I played the flute and the piccolo in the band. And I was a good student. And I was made fun of and called a nerd. And my parents were very strict, and they made me wear more modest clothes than the other children that weren't necessarily stylish. And I was picked on a lot as a child.
Without being too personal, were y'all in sexual relations?
Yes, sir.
Was there any issue that was raised as it relates to that sexual interaction?
The issue that I was unable to orgasm during sex. Ryan always put pressure on me to orgasm. He put pressure on me to get breast implants, and he also put pressure on me to remain a certain size or lose weight.
Huber's decision to testify at her retrial when she did not testify at the merits phase of her initial trial speaks to her narcissism. I have a hard time believing her attorneys advised her to get on the stand.
And I think it's important to say here, too, that her history of being abused or bullied at school, if it's true, is not a pathway towards psychopathy. A lot of people, unfortunately, are abused and are the victims of bullying. It doesn't turn them into criminals. So in her mind, she thinks that she can blame these individuals, fellow students, parents, other people in the community, on what she did, when in fact, it's all her.
You testified yesterday, I think the words you said, correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, that Mr. Poston was callous when you told him about your past?
My perception was that he was insensitive about it.
You asked Mr. Poston the question after you told him what happened, if he thought any less of you.
Yes.
And what was his response to you?
He said he wouldn't.
And in fact, he said that would be deranged for anyone to think less of you.
Yes, he used the word deranged.
There wasn't any data at all that said that he was an explosive, violent, impulsive person. But there was plenty of evidence that friends testified about that she could be manipulative. And I think even at the gun range, she joked about, like, killing him. So that wasn't going to work well for her at the trial, given her defense.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Shayna Hubers, guilty of murder. We, the jury, fix the defendant, Shayna Hubers' punishment for the offense of murder at life imprisonment.
It begins with a sound that should not exist anymore. A phone ringing in the dark, 21 years too late. In a quiet Texas town where the heat lingers even after midnight, where memories cling to the walls like dust, that ring cuts through time. It is not loud. It is not urgent. But it changes everything. Because when cold cases wake up, they never do so gently. In the summer of 2003, the town of Red Hollow was the kind of place people forgot to lock their doors. Population just under 12,000. One main road. 2 gas stations. A diner where everyone knew your name before you finished your coffee. It was a town that believed nothing truly bad could happen there. And belief, as it turns out, can be dangerous. Her name was Emily Carter. 17 years old. High school senior. Last seen on a Thursday night. She worked part-time at the Red Hollow movie theater, the kind with sticky floors and a single screen that smelled like burned popcorn. On June 12th, she clocked out at 9:47 p.m. Security footage shows her tying her hair into a loose ponytail, slinging a faded denim jacket over her shoulder, and stepping into the humid Texas night. She never made it home. At 10:31 p.m., her mother called her phone. No answer. At 11:02, another call. Straight to voicemail. By midnight, panic had already begun to creep into the Carter household, slow and cold, like water seeping under a door. By morning, the town was awake to a nightmare. Posters went up before the police finished their first coffee. Emily's face, smiling, hopeful, frozen in ink. Volunteers fanned out across fields and drainage ditches. Dogs barked themselves hoarse. Helicopters churned the sky. And somewhere in that frantic search, the first crack appeared. Emily's car was found abandoned. A blue 1998 Honda Civic, parked crooked near an access road just outside town, engine cold, driver's door unlocked. Her purse was still inside. Her keys lay on the passenger seat. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No fingerprints that didn't belong there. Just silence. The headlines came fast and hard. Teen girl vanishes in quiet Texas town. Community in shock as search intensifies. And then, the word that never leaves once it arrives, cold case. But in those early days, no one believed this would go cold. Not here. Not to Emily. Detectives worked around the clock. They traced her route home. They questioned coworkers, classmates, teachers, neighbors. Everyone had a version of Emily Carter. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. She was planning to leave town, some said. She met someone older, whispered others. She ran away. But the facts refused to cooperate. Emily had left her clothes packed neatly in her room. Her diary stopped mid-sentence the night before. Her savings were untouched. She had plans. College brochures on her desk. A future that did not include disappearing without a word. Then came the witnesses. A man who thought he saw her talking to someone near the theater. A woman who heard a scream but couldn't be sure it wasn't a fox. A truck driver who remembered a blue car but not the face inside. Each lead burned bright for a moment, then fizzled out. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And slowly, inevitably, the investigation began to stall. Evidence degraded. Witnesses forgot. Tips dried up. Detectives rotated off the case. Emily Carter's file grew thicker, heavier, and colder with every passing year. By 2006, the official status was whispered but not announced. Cold case. The town moved on because it had to. New families moved into old houses. The movie theater upgraded its projector. The diner repainted its sign. But there was one house that never quite recovered. Emily's mother kept the porch light on every night. For years. She told friends it was for comfort. Told police it didn't mean anything. But everyone knew. In Red Hollow, that light became a symbol. Hope. Denial. Refusal. Time passed. Technology changed. DNA databases expanded. Old cases were reopened across the country, solved by a hair, a fiber, a mistake someone made decades ago. But not Emily's. Until 2024. It started with a routine audit. A new detective, fresh eyes, going through old evidence logged before digital systems were standard. A box misfiled. A report never fully followed up. A name circled in red ink, almost faded. A neighbor. Back in 2003, he lived 3 houses down from the Carters. Quiet. Mid-30s. Divorced. Worked night shifts. He had been questioned once. Cleared quickly. Alibi accepted. File closed. His name barely registered in the case summary. But now, with modern tools, that name refused to stay quiet. A partial fingerprint, once considered unusable, was reprocessed. A DNA sample from an unrelated arrest years later entered the system. A match lit up a screen in a precinct office like a flare in the dark. The past had just collided with the present. Police knocked on his door at 6:12 a.m. By 8:03, he was in custody. The town woke up to another shockwave headline. Texas 2003 cold case reopened. Former neighbor arrested after 21 years. News vans lined the street where kids once rode bikes. Reporters whispered into microphones. Social media exploded with speculation, relief, rage, and disbelief. Some people said they always knew. Others said it made no sense. A few refused to believe it at all. Because an arrest does not equal answers. Not yet. Inside the interrogation room, the man sat quietly. Older now. Thinner. Hair gone gray. He listened as detectives spoke Emily's name for the first time in 2 decades. He showed no visible reaction. No confession. No explanation. Just silence. And in that silence, the case refused to settle. Evidence that should have been there was gone. Memories had decayed. Key witnesses were dead or unreachable. The timeline, once fragile, was now fractured. The question that haunted Red Hollow was no longer who. It was how. How could someone so close have vanished into the background for so long? How many moments had been missed? How many answers were buried with time? Emily Carter never came home. Her room remains untouched. Her story unfinished. And as the courtroom lights flicker on for a trial that may never fully explain what happened on that humid June night, the town understands something chilling. Some cases don't stay cold because there are no answers. They stay cold because the truth is harder to face than the mystery. And Red Hollow is about to find out just how deep that truth goes. The arrest did not bring relief. It brought noise. Red Hollow woke up to cameras parked on lawns that had never seen anything more dramatic than a yard sale. The street where Emily Carter once rode her bike became a corridor of cables, tripods, and whispered speculation. Neighbors who had waved politely for decades now avoided eye contact, curtains drawn tight, as if guilt itself might be contagious. Because when a cold case reopens, it doesn't just exhume evidence. It exhumes people. The man in custody was named Daniel Reeves. In 2003, he was 34 years old. A maintenance technician at a plastics plant on the outskirts of town. Divorced. No children. No criminal record worth mentioning. He lived alone in a beige rental house 3 doors down from the Carters, close enough to hear the screen door slam at night, close enough to know their routines, close enough to disappear into familiarity. Back then, police spoke to him once. He said he was working the late shift the night Emily vanished. Clocked in at 6 p.m., clocked out at 2 a.m. His supervisor confirmed it. Time cards backed it up. No reason to dig deeper. In a town desperate for quick clarity, that was enough. Now, 21 years later, that alibi sat under a microscope. The plant had changed owners twice. Records were incomplete. The supervisor who signed off on Reeves' shift died in 2011. And the time card system, investigators learned, could be manipulated manually. Small cracks, but enough for doubt to creep in. Detectives reopened interviews with anyone still alive and reachable. Old voices, shaken awake from years of silence, struggled to recall details that once seemed insignificant. What time did the shift change really happen? Did anyone remember seeing Reeves leave early? Was he ever absent from the floor that night? Answers came slowly. Uncertain. Incomplete. And then there were the things no one noticed in 2003 because no one was looking. Emily had mentioned Reeves once in her diary. Not by name. Just a line written weeks before she disappeared. The guy down the street watches too much. At the time, it meant nothing. Teenage paranoia, her parents thought. Now, that sentence was read aloud in a briefing room filled with people who understood how predators hide best in plain sight. The evidence that triggered the arrest was thin but unsettling. A partial fingerprint recovered from the exterior of Emily's car door, once dismissed as inconclusive, now matched Reeves with a high probability. A hair fiber found in the trunk, tested using updated mitochondrial DNA analysis, could not exclude him. Not definitive, but not nothing. Still, the case refused to behave neatly. Reeves' attorney moved quickly, calling the arrest a desperate attempt to rewrite history. He pointed to the lack of a body, the absence of a crime scene, the 21-year gap riddled with lost evidence and unreliable memories. The prosecution, meanwhile, leaned on a pattern. Reeves had moved twice after 2003, both times shortly after young women in neighboring towns reported being followed. No charges were filed. No official links established. Just echoes. Just shadows. Red Hollow split down the middle. Some residents were convinced this was justice finally catching up. Others felt betrayed, unable to reconcile the quiet man who fixed fences and nodded politely with the monster the headlines implied. Emily's mother said nothing publicly. She sat in the front row of the courtroom during preliminary hearings, hands folded, eyes fixed forward, as if afraid that looking anywhere else might shatter what little certainty she had left. The courtroom itself felt like a time capsule. Old wood, fluorescent lights, the smell of paper and dust. Reeves sat at the defense table, expression flat, listening as prosecutors outlined a theory built on fragments and inference. They painted a picture. A neighbor who knew Emily's schedule. A night when routine made her vulnerable. A brief encounter that escalated quietly, efficiently, without witnesses. They suggested Reeves intercepted Emily after she left work, possibly offering help, possibly exploiting trust. They argued he moved her car to create confusion, parked it where it would be found, and erased himself back into normalcy. But suggestion is not proof. And the defense hammered that point relentlessly. Where was the physical evidence of violence? Where was the body? Why wait 21 years to make an arrest if the case was so clear? The judge allowed the case to proceed. Outside, the town held its breath. Journalists dug into Emily's life, reconstructing her final days with a precision that bordered on invasive. Classmates were interviewed. Old teachers called. Social media accounts long abandoned were scraped for clues. Every detail was magnified. A text message sent at 9:52 p.m. A call that went unanswered. A gap of minutes that could hold everything or nothing. Then came the witness no one expected. A former coworker from the movie theater, now living out of state, contacted police after seeing the news. She said she remembered something she had never told anyone. That night, as Emily was locking up, a man stood across the street, leaning against a car. She thought it was strange at the time, but assumed he was waiting for someone. She couldn't see his face clearly. Only his posture. His stillness. Police showed her old photos. She hesitated. Then pointed. Reeves. The defense challenged her credibility immediately. Memory contamination. Media influence. 2 decades of distortion. Experts were called to explain how easily the brain rewrites the past. Still, the image lingered. A man waiting. A girl unaware. A moment suspended. As the trial date approached, pressure mounted. Prosecutors knew their case was fragile. One misstep could collapse everything. The defense knew that doubt was their strongest ally. And then, just days before jury selection, something unexpected surfaced. A box. Misplaced evidence, recovered from a long-forgotten storage facility scheduled for demolition. Inside were items logged from early searches near the access road where Emily's car was found. Among them, a torn piece of fabric. Denim. The lab rushed analysis. Fibers matched Emily's jacket. The tear pattern suggested force, not wear. Embedded within the threads were microscopic traces of grease consistent with industrial machinery lubricant. The same type used at the plastics plant where Reeves worked. The courtroom buzzed when the news broke. But even then, questions remained. How did the fabric get there? When was it torn? Could it have been transferred indirectly? Every answer spawned another question. And through it all, Reeves remained silent. No statement. No plea. No visible cracks. As the town prepared to relive its darkest chapter in open court, one truth became unavoidable. This was no longer just about Emily Carter. It was about time, about what it erases, about what it preserves, and whether, after 21 years, the truth could still survive long enough to be believed. The jury selection took 4 days, and every hour felt heavier than the last. Red Hollow had never hosted a trial like this. Not with this many cameras. Not with this much history pressing against the walls. Potential jurors filed in carrying coffee cups and unease, each one aware that whatever decision came out of this room would echo for the rest of their lives. They were asked the same questions again and again. Had they known Emily Carter? Had they followed the case over the years? Did they believe a man could live quietly for decades after committing a violent crime? Some answered easily. Others hesitated. One woman broke down in tears and asked to be excused. She said she remembered the night Emily disappeared because it was the night she decided never to let her own daughter walk home alone again. By the time 12 jurors and 4 alternates were sworn in, the town outside the courthouse felt hollowed out, like something essential had been removed and placed under glass. Opening statements began on a Monday morning under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly, relentlessly. The prosecution went first. They did not raise their voices. They did not dramatize. They spoke slowly, deliberately, as if each word had weight. They told the jury this was a cold case not because it lacked answers, but because those answers had been buried by proximity and trust. They described a neighbor who watched, waited, and understood patterns. A man who knew which lights went out first, which doors stayed unlocked, which routines never changed. They emphasized opportunity over spectacle. No masked stranger. No white van. Just someone close enough to feel invisible. They walked the jury through the timeline minute by minute, placing Daniel Reeves in the gaps where Emily Carter disappeared from certainty. They showed maps, diagrams, grainy stills from long-lost security footage. They explained the forensic evidence with care, acknowledging its limits while insisting its convergence told a story. Fingerprint. Fiber. Witness memory. Industrial grease. Alone, none of it proved guilt. Together, they argued, it formed a pattern too consistent to ignore. Then the defense stood and dismantled everything. They reminded the jury that patterns are not facts. That proximity is not intent. That memory is fragile, especially when it has been left alone for 21 years and then flooded with headlines and speculation. They held up the evidence like cracked glass, turning it until its imperfections caught the light. A partial fingerprint on a car parked in a public area. A hair fiber that could not definitively identify anyone. A witness who remembered a face only after seeing it on television. They asked the jury to imagine their own lives being reconstructed decades later, every routine recast as suspicious, every coincidence reframed as motive. This, the defense said, is not justice catching up. This is time playing tricks on grief. The room went quiet. Emily's mother stared straight ahead. The first witnesses were procedural. Detectives. Forensic analysts. Record keepers. They spoke in careful language, explaining chain of custody, reprocessing methods, advancements in DNA technology. The jury took notes. Pens scratched softly against paper. Then came the witnesses who remembered Emily as a person. Her best friend described the night they last spoke, laughing about something trivial, something now lost to time. A teacher talked about Emily's plans for college, her stubborn optimism, her habit of asking too many questions in class. Each testimony sharpened the absence. And absence was the prosecution's greatest obstacle. No remains. No confirmed crime scene. No definitive cause. The defense returned to that absence again and again, reminding the jury that a disappearance, however tragic, is not proof of murder. Then the prosecution called the former coworker. She sat stiffly in the witness box, hands clenched in her lap, voice trembling but steady. She repeated what she had told police, the man across the street, the way he didn't move, the feeling that something was off. When asked if she could identify that man in court, she pointed. Reeves did not react. The defense cross-examined gently at first, then surgically. Had she spoken to anyone about this memory before 2024? No. Had she seen images of Reeves in the media before contacting police? Yes. Was it possible her memory had been influenced by time, suggestion, repetition? She paused. I don't know, she said. That pause echoed louder than anything else that day. The following morning brought the evidence everyone had been waiting for. The torn denim. An evidence technician unfolded it carefully, like something fragile, something almost sacred. The jury leaned forward. The fabric looked ordinary. Too ordinary to carry so much weight. An expert testified about the tear pattern. Directional force. Tension consistent with sudden movement. Not a gradual rip. Not wear and tear. Then came the lubricant. A chemist explained how the microscopic residue matched the type used in industrial machinery, narrowing its origin. Not unique, but specific. The defense objected repeatedly. Relevance. Speculation. The judge overruled some objections, sustained others. The jury watched the push and pull, absorbing not just the facts, but the uncertainty wrapped around them. During a break, a juror was overheard whispering, "It's all maybes." That whisper traveled fast. Outside the courthouse, protests began. Some demanded justice for Emily. Others held signs reading, "Doubt is not guilt." Families avoided downtown. Businesses closed early. The diner put up a sign asking reporters to leave. Inside the courtroom, tension thickened. Then, on the 8th day of testimony, something shifted. The prosecution called a witness who had not been mentioned publicly. A former coworker of Reeves from the plastics plant. He was older now, retired. His voice carried the rasp of someone who had spent decades around loud machines. He said he remembered the night Emily disappeared because it was the night Reeves asked him to cover part of his shift. Just an hour, Reeves had said. Said he wasn't feeling well. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Favors like that were common. But the plant logs, incomplete as they were, showed an irregularity that night. A manual adjustment. A correction initialed by a supervisor who could no longer confirm why. The defense objected immediately. Hearsay. Unreliable memory. No documentation. But the seed was planted. If Reeves left work early, even briefly, the timeline changed. Reeves' attorney countered with experts on memory decay, explaining how easily details can be reshaped after years of retelling. They pointed out inconsistencies in the witnesses' statements. They reminded the jury that no one noticed anything unusual at the time. Because nothing looked unusual. That was the problem. As days passed, the jury seemed restless. Some avoided looking at Reeves. Others watched him closely, searching for something, anything, that might betray him. He gave them nothing. No visible emotion. No outbursts. No explanation. Emily's mother finally spoke during a recess, her voice low, almost detached. "I don't need him to cry," she said. "I just need the truth to stop hiding." The trial moved toward its final phase with a sense of inevitability that felt misplaced. There was no clear crescendo. No moment of undeniable revelation. Just layers of possibility stacked against doubt. And in that space between what could be proven and what was felt, the case hovered, unresolved even as it unfolded. Because some cold cases don't thaw evenly. They melt in patches. And what emerges is rarely clean. By the second week of testimony, time inside the courtroom began to distort. Days blurred into each other, measured not by hours, but by who took the stand and what pieces of the past they carried with them. Outside, summer heat pressed against the windows. Inside, the air conditioning hummed, steady and indifferent, as if trying to freeze the moment in place. The prosecution knew what they were up against. They had no body, no confession, no single piece of evidence that could stand alone. So they shifted their strategy. They stopped trying to prove what happened. They focused on how it could have happened without anyone noticing. A behavioral analyst took the stand, careful to avoid sensational language. He spoke about familiarity crimes, about offenders who do not need force because they rely on proximity, routine, and trust. About how neighbors commit crimes not despite being known, but because they are known. The jury listened. He described how such offenders often insert themselves subtly into daily life, helping with small repairs, making casual conversation, learning schedules without asking, becoming background noise. Then he said something that hung in the air. Disappearance, he explained, does not require chaos. It requires timing. The defense objected. The judge allowed it. Next came a reconstruction of Emily's final known movements. A digital map glowed on a screen as a detective traced her route from the theater to her neighborhood. The distances were short, familiar, walkable. The prosecutor paused the video at a point just 2 blocks from Emily's home. This, she said, is where certainty ends. Because after that point, nothing could be confirmed. No cameras. No witnesses who were sure. No sounds anyone could swear were screams. Just a gap. And gaps, the prosecution argued, are where predators operate. The defense countered immediately. They reminded the jury that gaps are also where assumptions thrive. That absence invites imagination. That the state was asking them to replace proof with probability. Then they called their own expert. A forensic statistician who spoke calmly, almost apologetically, as he explained the limits of partial matches and degraded samples. He showed charts, percentages, error margins. He said what no one in the courtroom wanted to hear. That evidence recovered decades later is not just old. It is altered. Contaminated by time, by storage conditions, by repeated handling. He warned against retrofitting conclusions to fragments that were never meant to bear such weight. One juror frowned. Another stopped taking notes. Then came the testimony that no one could prepare for. Emily's father. He had avoided the spotlight for years, retreating into work, into silence, into a life that functioned but never fully resumed. When he took the stand, he looked smaller than he once had, his shoulders slightly hunched, his voice soft but steady. He spoke about the night Emily didn't come home, about pacing the living room, about driving the same streets over and over, calling her name into the dark like it might answer back. He described the porch light. He said he replaced the bulb every few months, not because it burned out, but because it dimmed, and he needed it bright. He needed it visible. The defense did not cross-examine for long. Some testimony carries its own gravity. But gravity is not evidence. That afternoon, the prosecution introduced something new. Not physical evidence. Behavior. They presented records showing Reeves had called in sick twice in the weeks following Emily's disappearance. Unusual for him, according to plant attendance logs. They showed how he declined overtime he normally accepted. How he requested a transfer to a different shift shortly afterward. Small changes. But prosecutors framed them as cracks in routine. Signs of stress. Disruption. The defense dismantled that theory point by point. People react differently to community trauma, they said. Some withdraw. Some change habits. Some simply want distance from the noise. Reeves' attorney asked a simple question. If behavior after a tragedy is evidence of guilt, then who among us is safe? The jury shifted in their seats. Then came the moment everyone feared. The prosecution asked to introduce evidence of prior incidents. Not crimes. Not charges. Just reports. Women from neighboring towns who had claimed they were followed. One who said a man watched her from across the street. Another who noticed a familiar car parked too often near her workplace. None of them could identify Reeves conclusively. None of the incidents resulted in arrests. The judge allowed limited testimony. The defense objected fiercely, arguing prejudice. The jury was instructed carefully. This was context, not proof. But context is powerful. As each woman spoke, describing unease, intuition, the feeling of being observed, something shifted in the room. These were not accusations. They were echoes. Reeves stared straight ahead. Not a word. Not a flicker. Then, unexpectedly, the defense rested. No dramatic flourish. No final witness to explain everything away. Just a quiet confidence that the burden of proof had not been met. The prosecution asked for one more witness. A former evidence clerk. She testified that in 2003, the box containing items recovered near the access road had been mislabeled during a department move. She said the error was discovered years later, but never corrected because the case had gone cold. The defense seized on it. If evidence could be misplaced, mislabeled, mishandled, how could anyone trust its integrity now? The courtroom felt like a balance beam, swaying under the weight of doubt and hope. As closing arguments approached, Red Hollow held its breath again. People lined up outside the courthouse hours early, just to sit inside and listen. Some came for justice. Some came for closure. Some came because they had lived with this question for 21 years and needed to hear it spoken out loud one last time. Emily's empty chair in the courtroom front row felt heavier than any presence. Because whether the jury believed the prosecution or the defense, one truth remained untouched. Emily Carter vanished without explanation. And no verdict could change that. The question looming now was not whether something terrible happened. It was whether time had erased the line between knowing and believing. And whether justice, delayed this long, could still be recognized when it finally arrived. Closing arguments arrived without ceremony, like a door shutting quietly but finally. The courtroom was full in a way it hadn't been before. No empty benches. No shifting bodies looking for exits. People sat rigid, eyes forward, as if movement itself might disrupt whatever fragile clarity remained. Outside, the town waited, suspended between belief and doubt. The prosecution stood first. They did not rush. They reminded the jury that this was not a case built on spectacle. No dramatic confession. No violent outburst caught on tape. They told them that real crimes, especially the ones that last, rarely announce themselves. They spoke about absence. About how Emily Carter vanished into a space no one could account for, and how only one person consistently occupied that space without explanation. A neighbor. A watcher. Someone who knew the rhythms of the street so well that he could move through them unseen. They returned to the timeline again, slower now, more deliberate. They pointed out how Reeves' alibi depended on systems that no longer existed, signed off by people who could no longer speak. How small irregularities, once meaningless, now aligned too cleanly to ignore. They asked the jury to consider the totality. Not one fingerprint. Not one fiber. Not one witness. But all of it. They talked about the denim fragment, about grease embedded where it didn't belong. About a girl who wrote that she felt watched. About a coworker who remembered a man standing still in the dark. About a shift change that might not have been complete. They never once said the word monster. They didn't need to. Then they said something else. That justice does not always arrive intact. That sometimes it comes broken, delayed, incomplete. But that does not make it any less necessary. The defense rose slowly. They spoke of restraint, of caution, of the danger of filling gaps with conviction. They reminded the jury that the prosecution's case relied on maybes, on interpretations filtered through time and tragedy. They held up the evidence again, but this time they stripped it of narrative. A partial fingerprint with no timestamp. A fiber that could have transferred secondhand. A witness memory formed after years of silence and exposure. They asked the jury to imagine being judged not by what could be proven, but by what felt right to believe. They pointed to the empty space where a body should be. No remains. No cause of death. No confirmation that a crime even occurred. They warned against turning grief into certainty. When the judge instructed the jury and they filed out to deliberate, the room exhaled for the first time in days. The wait began. Hour 1 passed quietly. People checked phones they weren't supposed to have. Lawyers whispered. Emily's mother stared at her hands. Hour 3 brought speculation. Some said the jury looked divided. Others swore they saw resolve on certain faces. The town outside refreshed news feeds compulsively, desperate for clarity that refused to arrive. By evening, the jury sent out its first note. A request to review the timeline. They wanted to see it again. Hope stirred, then receded. The second note came an hour later. They asked to review testimony regarding Reeves' work shift. The third note came after dark. They wanted the denim evidence brought back into the room. Each request felt like a heartbeat. Slow, heavy, uncertain. At 9:42 p.m., the jury returned. The courtroom stood. The verdict form was passed forward. The foreperson's voice was steady, but not strong. On the charge of murder. The word hung there unfinished, as if even language hesitated. Not guilty. A sound rippled through the room. Not gasps. Not shouts. Just a collective shift, the noise of expectation collapsing inward. Reeves closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Emily's mother did not move. The judge thanked the jury. Reeves was escorted out a free man. Cameras flashed. Headlines began forming before anyone reached the doors. Former neighbor acquitted in Texas cold case trial. But acquittal is not exoneration. Outside, Reeves did not speak. He walked past microphones, past questions, past a town that no longer knew how to see him. Supporters claimed victory. Critics called it failure. Inside the Carter home, the porch light stayed on. The case, officially, was unresolved. But the trial had changed something. Old tips resurfaced. People re-examined memories they had dismissed. Law enforcement admitted, quietly, that there were still loose ends they could not close. And then, weeks later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the district attorney's office. No return address. Typed. No fingerprints. It didn't confess to anything. It asked a question. Did you ever search the land south of the access road after the flood of 2004? The letter was brief. Almost polite. Investigators checked records. They had not. That area had been underwater for weeks after the flood. Searches were suspended. When the water receded, resources were redirected. The case drifted. Search teams were assembled quietly. No press releases. No cameras. They went out at dawn. And for the first time in 21 years, they brought cadaver dogs back to Red Hollow. The dogs alerted near a stand of trees half a mile from where Emily's car had been found. Nothing definitive was uncovered. No remains. No clothing. Just disturbed soil. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to answer them. The letter writer was never identified. Reeves moved away within months. Emily Carter remained missing. And Red Hollow learned something it never wanted to understand. That justice can speak in verdicts, but truth does not answer to courts. Some cases don't end when the trial does. They simply retreat into the dark again. Waiting. The acquittal did not quiet Red Hollow. It sharpened it. After the cameras left and the courthouse steps emptied, the town entered a new phase of the nightmare, one without structure, without schedules, without an ending anyone could point to. The trial was over, but the cold case felt more alive than it had in decades, pulsing beneath everyday routines, surfacing in conversations that stopped when someone unfamiliar walked by. People began to remember things. Not clearly, not confidently, but insistently. A woman recalled a car idling too long near the access road years ago. A man remembered hearing metal scrape against metal late one night, then deciding it was nothing. A retired deputy admitted, quietly, that the initial search perimeter had been too narrow, that resources were thin, that decisions were made fast because they had to be. None of it was actionable. All of it was heavy. The anonymous letter changed the tone inside law enforcement. It wasn't the question itself, it was the timing. The writer knew about the flood, knew about the suspended searches, knew where attention had lapsed. That kind of specificity didn't come from rumor. It came from proximity. Or memory. Investigators reopened maps, aerial photos, old environmental surveys. The land south of the access road had changed since 2003. What was once scrub and open dirt was now uneven ground, scarred by erosion, partially reclaimed by vegetation. The flood had rearranged everything, carrying debris, collapsing shallow pits, blurring lines that might once have been obvious. Search teams worked slowly, deliberately. They found animal remains, discarded trash, old tools rusted beyond recognition. Every false alert was logged, every disturbed patch photographed. The dogs worked methodically, tails low, noses to the ground, following trails that only they understood. Nothing definitive surfaced. Still, the searches continued longer than anyone expected. Because someone, somewhere, believed there was more to find. Inside the district attorney's office, the case file grew again. New statements were added, old ones revisited. But there was an unspoken truth hanging over every meeting. Daniel Reeves could not be tried again for murder. Double jeopardy was final. Whatever the truth was now, it had to exist outside the courtroom. That reality fractured the town in a different way. Some people felt relief that the trial was over, even without answers. Others felt robbed. Angry. As if something essential had been taken twice. Once when Emily disappeared, and again when the verdict closed a door they weren't ready to shut. Emily's mother stopped speaking to the press entirely. She began volunteering at a missing persons organization 2 counties over, answering phones, filing paperwork, listening to strangers describe the moment their lives split in half. People said she was calm, focused, purposeful. But at home, the porch light still burned. Investigators took another look at Reeves' movements after the acquittal. He sold his house quickly, below market value. Paid in cash. No explanation. He moved west, then farther south. Short stays. No permanent address. No social media. No obvious attempt to defend his reputation or reclaim his place in Red Hollow. He vanished again. This time legally. That disappearance unsettled people more than the verdict ever had. If he was innocent, why leave? If he was guilty, why now? The questions multiplied, feeding on each other. Then, 6 months after the trial, another detail surfaced, one that had been overlooked not because it was hidden, but because it seemed irrelevant at the time. Emily's phone. In 2003, it was considered useless. No GPS. No data trail worth examining. It had last pinged off a tower near the theater shortly after she left work, then gone silent. But technology doesn't stand still. A digital forensics consultant reviewing old case materials suggested re-examining the phone records using modern triangulation modeling. It wouldn't give an exact location, but it could narrow movement. The analysis took weeks. When it came back, it showed something subtle. Emily's phone did not move in a straight line home. For a brief window, less than 10 minutes, it appeared to travel in the opposite direction, toward the access road. Then it went dark. The margin of error was wide, the data imperfect, but it aligned uncomfortably well with the prosecution's original theory. Someone had redirected her. Someone close enough to intercept, close enough to convince. The information was not enough to reopen a case, but it was enough to reopen wounds. News of the analysis leaked quietly. Online forums reignited. Amateur sleuths rebuilt timelines with obsessive precision. Some accused the state of incompetence. Others accused the defense of manipulation. A few accused the town itself. Because Red Hollow had protected its own before, looked away before, trusted familiarity more than instinct. And familiarity had teeth. The anonymous letter was analyzed again. Linguists examined phrasing. Investigators compared syntax to known statements. Nothing conclusive. The writer had been careful. Too careful. Then another letter arrived. This one shorter. Water changes everything. That was all it said. Search teams returned to the area after a heavy rain. New erosion exposed layers of soil that hadn't seen daylight in years. One of the dogs alerted sharply near a shallow depression filled with runoff. Digging began. They uncovered a shoe. Blue. Size 7. Worn. It matched a brand Emily owned. But not definitively. No serial number. No unique damage. Just a common shoe, degraded by time and water. It was enough to bring the cameras back. Enough to stir the town into another cycle of hope and restraint. Forensics could not confirm it belonged to Emily Carter. And so it joined the list of almosts. Almost evidence. Almost truth. Almost closure. The search was called off again. Emily's case returned to its place in the system, active, but suspended. Open, but immobile. And in Red Hollow, people learned to live with the shape of that uncertainty. They learned that some stories don't end when the verdict is read. They learned that acquittal does not equal innocence. They learned that mystery can outlast memory. At night, when the town grew quiet, the access road remained empty. No signs. No markers. Just asphalt stretching into dark fields that refused to give anything back. And somewhere between what was known and what was never spoken, the truth waited. Not frozen. Just buried deep enough to survive time itself. Time did what it always does in Red Hollow. It softened the edges without healing the wound. Months passed after the shoe was found. Then a year. The headlines faded again, replaced by new disasters, new scandals, new missing faces in other towns. But Emily Carter never fully receded. Her name lingered in the pauses of conversation, in the way people still slowed near the access road, in the porch light that continued to burn like a quiet refusal. Inside law enforcement, the case entered a strange limbo. It was no longer dormant, but it was no longer advancing. The file was marked active investigation, a designation that meant resources were limited but attention never fully withdrawn. A few detectives rotated in and out, careful, methodical, unwilling to let the trail vanish completely. They reviewed everything again, not looking for what they missed, but for what they misunderstood. Patterns began to emerge. Not patterns of guilt, patterns of behavior. Emily's routine had been predictable. Work, home, occasional stops at the gas station. Messages sent at the same times to the same people. On the night she vanished, only one deviation appeared. She hesitated. Phone records showed a brief pause between leaving the theater and heading toward the access road. Not movement. Stillness. As if she had stopped. As if she had been talking to someone. Someone she didn't fear. That detail gnawed at investigators. Because fear leaves traces. Urgency. Panic. None of that existed. Which suggested choice. Or trust. Detectives began re-interviewing people who had been on the margins of the case, those who never quite fit into the main narrative. The neighbor across the street. The mechanic who serviced Reeves' car that summer. The cashier at the gas station Emily sometimes stopped at, though not that night. Most had nothing new to offer. But one interview stalled the room. A woman who had lived 2 blocks away in 2003, now elderly, hesitant, her memory fragmented but persistent. She said she remembered seeing Emily that night. Or thought she did. Standing near a car she didn't recognize. Talking. Calm. Not struggling. She had never come forward because she assumed police already knew. They asked her to describe the car. She couldn't. They asked her to describe the man. She paused. He wasn't tall, she said. Didn't look angry. He looked normal. Normal. The word hit harder than any accusation. Because monsters announce themselves in stories. Normal people disappear into them. The description didn't identify Reeves. It didn't identify anyone. But it reinforced the theory investigators couldn't shake, that whatever happened to Emily did not begin with violence. It began with familiarity. At the same time, online speculation took a darker turn. Anonymous posts accused townspeople of covering things up, of lying in 2003, of protecting one of their own. Old grudges resurfaced, recast as motives. Innocent interactions were reinterpreted as signs. The town fractured again, not over Reeves this time, but over itself. Who knew what? Who should have spoken? Who benefited from silence? Red Hollow had always prided itself on closeness. Now that closeness felt suffocating. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel Reeves resurfaced. Not physically. Digitally. A financial analyst reviewing unrelated fraud cases flagged a transaction pattern that traced back to him. Small cash deposits. Infrequent but consistent. Spread across different states. Enough to suggest a person trying to stay functional without being visible. Detectives took notice. Reeves had not committed a crime by moving or using cash. But his movements were tracked as best they could be: addresses, short-term rentals, employment records under his name. He worked maintenance jobs. Temporary contracts. No ties. No community. A man in motion. And motion, investigators knew, is often a response. To pressure. To fear. Or to a past that refuses to stay buried. They requested an interview. Through his attorney, Reeves declined. No explanation. No statement. Just silence again. that silence became part of the story. Meanwhile, Emily's case began appearing in academic circles, not as a crime, but as a study, a model of investigative decay, of how time erodes certainty and reshapes narrative. Her disappearance was cited in lectures about cold cases, about the limits of forensic revival. Her name became an example. That angered people who loved her. Because Emily was not a cautionary tale. She was a person. Her younger brother, now older than she ever was, gave an interview for the first time. He spoke carefully, deliberately, as if choosing each word might preserve something fragile. He said the worst part wasn't not knowing. It was knowing that someone else did. Somewhere. He said the town still felt wrong to him. Like it was missing a note it never recovered. He said he didn't care about verdicts anymore. I just want the truth to stop hiding behind rules, he said. The interview went viral. For a brief moment, attention surged again. Then it settled. As attention always does. And then came the storm. Not metaphorical. Actual. A severe weather system moved through the region, dumping rain for days. Rivers swelled. Low-lying areas flooded. The land south of the access road, already scarred by the flood of 2004, changed again. When the water receded, something new appeared. Or something old. A local farmer noticed exposed debris near a tree line that hadn't been visible before. He called it in, uncertain, apologetic, assuming it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Search teams returned, cautious now, restrained by years of false alarms. They documented everything. Measured. Photographed. Dug slowly. They found fragments of clothing. Fabric degraded beyond recognition, but consistent with early 2000s materials. No logos. No tags. Then they found something else. Metal. A small, rusted object. Bent. Partially buried. A key. Not a car key. A house key. The type commonly cut in red hollow in the early 2000s. The Carters had replaced their locks years earlier. Records showed the original keys were never recovered. Forensics could not definitively link the key to Emily. But the shape matched. The wear pattern aligned. The margin was thin. But thinner margins had built entire cases. The discovery was not announced publicly at first. Investigators didn't want another wave of speculation unless they had something solid. They worked quietly, methodically, aware that every step now carried the weight of 2 decades. The land was searched again. Deeper. Further. Nothing else emerged. No remains. No final proof. The evidence was sent for analysis. Results would take time. And time, in this case, was the most unreliable witness of all. Red Hollow waited again. Not with hope. With endurance. Because by now, the town understood something fundamental. This case was no longer moving toward resolution. It was circling it. And circles, when they tighten enough, either reveal the truth or collapse entirely. The porch light still burned. And somewhere beyond the access road, beneath layers of altered earth and unanswered questions, the past remained restless. Not gone. Just unwilling to speak without being forced. The lab results came back in stages, never all at once, as if even science hesitated to deliver a complete answer. First, the fabric fragments. The fibers were too degraded for definitive identification, but their weave and composition were consistent with mass-produced clothing sold in Texas in the early 2000s. Nothing unique. Nothing personal. Enough to suggest age, not ownership. Then the key. The metal analysis showed long-term exposure to water and soil consistent with flooding cycles in the area south of the access road. Microscopic where patterns suggested years of contact with other keys before separation, not a pristine spare dropped accidentally. It had been used, carried, lost deliberately or violently. But no DNA survived. The results landed like dull thuds instead of explosions. Each one added weight without clarity. Investigators gathered around conference tables covered in maps and photographs, aware that they were assembling a picture that refused to come into focus. The question shifted again. If Emily's key was there, how did it get there? Keys don't travel on their own. They don't drift miles away unless carried or discarded. And whoever carried it knew the land well enough to choose a place that would erase itself. That realization narrowed the field in a way no jury ever could. Because knowledge of that land was not universal. Red Hollow was small, but not everyone wandered south of the access road. That area was known to flood, known to be unstable, known mostly to farmers, maintenance workers, and people who had no reason to be seen. People like Reeves. Investigators never said his name out loud in official meetings anymore. They didn't need to. It hovered there, implied, unavoidable. But implication was not leverage. They needed pressure. And pressure required proximity. A decision was made quietly. They would find Reeves. Not to arrest him. Not to charge him. Just to talk. It took months. He had been careful, but not invisible. A utility subcontractor in New Mexico. A short-term lease in Arizona. A medical clinic visit paid in cash. When they finally located him, he was living outside a small desert town, working maintenance at a storage facility. The kind of job that came with keys. Lots of keys. Keys that opened and closed spaces most people never entered. The interview was voluntary. He agreed. They met in a neutral room at a local sheriff's office. No cameras. No grand entrances. Just two detectives, older now, slower, carrying the accumulated weight of a case that refused to age out. Reeves looked tired. Not nervous. Not angry. Just worn. They spoke about neutral things first. Work. The heat. How long he'd been there. He answered easily, almost gratefully, as if conversation itself was a relief. Then they brought up Red Hollow. His jaw tightened, just slightly. They talked about the flood. About the land changing. About things resurfacing. They did not accuse. They waited. Reeves listened. His eyes fixed on a point somewhere behind the detectives, as if he were watching something else entirely. When they showed him a photograph of the key, his expression changed. Not shock. Recognition. It lasted less than a second. But it was there. He didn't say it was Emily's. He didn't say it wasn't. He said a lot of people lost things back then. That was all. They asked him if he remembered the night she disappeared. He said yes. They asked him if he remembered speaking to her. He said no. They asked him why he left Red Hollow so quickly after the trial. He shrugged. Nothing left there for me, he said. The interview ended without confession, without denial strong enough to matter. Legally, it changed nothing. But for the detectives, something shifted. Because recognition is not coincidence. Back in Texas, the findings were discussed behind closed doors. Prosecutors considered options they had avoided before: civil actions, public inquests, renewed missing persons classification adjustments. None offered resolution. The case had reached a place beyond law. Emily's mother was informed privately about the discoveries. She listened, asked no questions, thanked them, then said something unexpected. "I don't need proof anymore," she said. "I just need him to live with it." Her words spread quietly through the department. Live with it. As if guilt were a sentence that didn't require a judge. Meanwhile, the town reacted in fragments. Some residents felt the discoveries confirmed what they had always believed. Others recoiled from the idea that the truth might exist without formal closure. A memorial was proposed near the access road. It was debated fiercely. Would it honor Emily or cement suspicion without verdict? Would it bring peace or reopen wounds? In the end, no marker was placed. The land remained unnamed, unclaimed. The academic interest in the case deepened. Experts wrote about it not as a failure, but as a boundary, where justice systems meet their limits, where time transforms evidence into suggestion, where truth survives only in pieces. Emily Carter became a symbol again, not of innocence lost, but of certainty denied. Years passed. Reeves stayed where he was. He aged. He kept working. He never returned to Red Hollow, never spoke publicly, never sued, never defended himself beyond silence. And silence, over time, took on its own shape. People who knew him said he slept poorly, that he avoided water, that he never stayed in one place long enough to unpack fully. Nothing illegal. Nothing provable. Just patterns. Back in Red Hollow, the porch light finally went out. Not because answers came, but because Emily's mother moved. She left the house to her son and relocated closer to her volunteer work. When asked why she turned off the light after all those years, she answered simply, "She knows where I am now." The case file remained open. The evidence rested in storage. The land south of the access road grew wild again. And somewhere between what could be said and what could never be proven, the truth continued to exist, not as a conclusion, but as a presence. Unfinished. Watching. Waiting. Because some cold cases do not end in revelation. They end in recognition. And recognition, once seen, cannot be unseen. The years that followed did not arrive loudly. They slipped in quietly, one after another, like footsteps no one bothered to track anymore. Red Hollow aged. New families moved in who only half knew the story, who had heard Emily Carter's name in passing, but never felt the weight of it settle in their chests. For them, the access road was just a road. The fields were just fields. The past was something that belonged to someone else. For those who remembered, forgetting was never an option. The case sat in a climate-controlled room, boxed and labeled, its edges softened by handling, but never worn thin. Occasionally, someone would open it. A new detective. A student. A visiting consultant chasing the idea that one more look might reveal what everyone else had missed. It never did. But each review added something intangible, a deeper understanding of how the case had resisted resolution not through complexity, but through simplicity. There had been no chaos. No obvious rupture. Just a moment where Emily Carter stepped off her known path and never returned. That simplicity was what haunted people. If it could happen like that, it could happen anywhere. A decade after the acquittal, a podcast took interest. Not a flashy one. No reenactments. No ominous music layered too thick. Just a careful, restrained series that laid out the facts and then stopped short of conclusions. The host refused to speculate. Refused to name suspects outright. Listeners did it for him. Downloads spiked. Old interviews resurfaced. Former residents of Red Hollow sent emails correcting small details, arguing timelines, insisting on memories they had never shared before. Most were useless. One wasn't. A listener from another state wrote in, claiming he had worked briefly at the plastics plant in 2003. He remembered Reeves. Remembered him leaving early one night and joking about finally having time to clean up a mess. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it sounded like something else. Investigators followed up. The man could not be sure of the date. Could not confirm the context. His memory was tangled with years of retelling it to himself. It went nowhere. But the phrase lingered. Clean up a mess. That phrase echoed again years later, in a different form, when a journalist uncovered an old maintenance report from the plant. A minor incident logged the morning after Emily disappeared. A spill. Non-hazardous. Cleaned overnight. The report was signed. Daniel Reeves. It proved nothing. It explained nothing. But coincidence, repeated often enough, begins to feel deliberate. As the 20th anniversary of Emily's disappearance approached, the town faced an unspoken question. What do you do with a story that refuses to end? Some wanted a public memorial. Others wanted silence. The town council debated, deferred, debated again. In the end, they did nothing, which somehow felt truer than any decision. On the anniversary night, a few people gathered anyway. No speeches. No cameras. Just candles placed near the access road, their flames wavering in the dark. Someone read Emily's name aloud. Someone else whispered an apology no one could trace back to its source. The candles burned out one by one. Life went on. Then, quietly, something changed. Reeves stopped moving. He settled in one place longer than before. Took a full-time position. Opened a small checking account instead of using cash exclusively. Neighbors described him as distant but polite. A man who fixed things efficiently and avoided conversation. Stability can be a form of surrender, or a form of exhaustion. Investigators noticed the shift, but had no authority to act on it. They watched from a distance, the way you watch a storm that might never reach land. Emily's brother married, had children. He told them about their aunt in simple terms. That she was kind, that she loved movies, that she should have been there. He never told them how she disappeared. Some stories are inherited slowly. Then came the call no one expected. A nurse from a long-term care facility contacted authorities after a patient made a statement that unsettled her. The patient was elderly, confused at times, a former resident of Red Hollow who had moved away years earlier. She said she remembered a girl crying near the access road, said she heard it the night the town searched, said she assumed someone else would report it. The nurse wasn't sure it meant anything, but she reported it anyway. Investigators followed up gently. The woman's memory was inconsistent. Dates blurred. Details shifted. But the core remained. Crying. A car door closing. Silence. It couldn't be corroborated. But it couldn't be dismissed either. The case absorbed the statement like it absorbed everything else, not as proof, but as weight. By then, the file had become something more than an investigation. It was a ledger of human hesitation. Moments when someone thought, it's probably nothing. Moments when someone assumed someone else would act. Moments when certainty required courage that never arrived. Emily Carter disappeared once. But she was lost many times after that. Lost in paperwork. Lost in doubt. Lost in the belief that answers would come later. As the years stacked up, the case no longer felt unfinished. It felt complete in its incompleteness. A closed loop of questions that circled the same truths without landing on them. Reeves aged quietly. Red Hollow endured. And the access road remained unchanged, no marker, no sign, no acknowledgement of what it held or might have held. Just asphalt. Just dirt. Just the echo of a night that never resolved. Because some cold cases do not ask to be solved. They ask to be remembered. And remembering, in the absence of certainty, becomes its own kind of justice. If memory was the quiet current beneath the case, then time was the pressure that slowly distorted it. By the 22nd year, the file no longer moved through the department, it lived there. Detectives rotated, chiefs retired, software systems changed. Emily Carter's case migrated from paper to microfilm to digital scans, each transition losing something subtle, a margin note, the texture of a witness's hesitation, the sense of urgency that once clung to every page. Yet one thing grew sharper. Patterns. A cold case unit analyst, newly assigned and unburdened by the emotional fatigue of history, noticed something others had overlooked not because it was hidden, but because it was familiar. She mapped Reeves's movements across decades, jobs, addresses, short-term leases, unexplained gaps. They formed a shape. Not a straight line. A circle. Reeves had always returned to places like Red Hollow. Small towns. Industrial edges. Access roads. Temporary anonymity wrapped in routine labor. He never stayed long enough to be remembered deeply, but long enough to leave impressions, vague, unsettling ones. She wrote a memo. It didn't accuse. It suggested. The memo sat for months. Then another case surfaced 2 counties over. A woman missing. Different age. Different decade. Same geography. Same type of road. Same narrow window of opportunity. Not enough for a connection, but enough to wake something dormant. Investigators compared notes carefully, aware of the danger of seeing mirrors where none existed. Cold cases punish imagination that outruns evidence. Still, the parallels accumulated like dust, thin layers, easy to ignore until someone wipes a finger through them. They requested permission for a quiet review. No warrants. No confrontations. Just observation. Reeves had aged into invisibility. Gray hair. Slight stoop. A man who blended easily into waiting rooms and grocery aisles. He volunteered occasionally. Fixed things for neighbors. Kept conversations short. When interviewed, informally, he was cooperative. Too cooperative. He answered questions before they were fully asked. corrected dates unprompted, smiled at moments that didn't require it. His tone never changed, even when Emily's name was spoken. Especially then. Investigators left with nothing actionable, but something intangible had shifted. He wasn't afraid. People innocent of suspicion often bristle, deny, demand clarity. Reeves did none of that. He treated the questions as a courtesy, a ritual he had expected eventually. As if he had rehearsed patience. The analyst returned to the maintenance report, the spill, the overnight cleanup, the signature. She cross-referenced plant logs, delivery schedules, overtime approvals. Buried in a secondary ledger was a detail no one had flagged before. The cleanup crew that night had consisted of one person. Reeves. Company policy required two. The deviation had been approved retroactively by a supervisor who no longer remembered signing it. Memories fade. Paper doesn't, unless it's never looked at closely. The finding still wasn't proof. But it narrowed the story, reduced the number of unknowns, turned coincidence into opportunity. Then technology did what time could not. Advances in soil analysis made it possible to test microscopic traces embedded in old items. Evidence long thought inert regained relevance. Emily's recovered shoe, preserved and stored, was retested. The results came back inconclusive at first, then revised. A rare industrial compound, used primarily in plastics manufacturing, was detected in quantities inconsistent with environmental exposure. The plant Reeves had worked at used it routinely. Defense attorneys would argue contamination, chain of custody issues, statistical irrelevance. They would not be wrong. But the narrative was changing. Not dramatically. Gradually. Like light adjusting in a room where someone has been sitting in darkness too long. The case briefing that followed was cautious, restrained, almost clinical. No one said the word arrest. No one promised resolution. But for the first time in decades, the question was no longer what happened to Emily Carter. It was how long did it take us to understand what we were looking at? Reeves was brought in again, this time formally. He listened. He nodded. He asked for water. When shown the maintenance report, he squinted, leaned back, and said quietly, "That was a long time ago." When shown the soil analysis, he exhaled, as if relieved something abstract had finally taken form. He did not confess. But he did say something new. "I wondered when you'd stop asking the wrong questions." The room went still. Interviews paused. Attorneys were called. Statements were clarified, contextualized, diluted by legal necessity. Still, words cannot be unsaid. For Emily's family, the call came late at night. Careful language. No promises. Just movement where there had been none for years. Her brother sat in silence afterward, phone still in his hand. Hope, after so long, felt dangerous. The town learned slowly. Through whispers. Through a single paragraph buried in a regional paper. Cold case developments underway. No names. But everyone knew. Candles appeared again near the access road, not organized, not announced. Just small flames placed by people who had grown older alongside the mystery. Reeves returned home that night. He packed nothing. Somewhere between midnight and morning he sat awake, staring at a past he could no longer keep folded. Cold cases do not end with answers. They end with shifts of power, of certainty, of silence. And as dawn crept over Red Hollow, the balance tilted at last. Not toward justice, but toward truth. And sometimes, that is the harder weight to bear. The arrest did not arrive with sirens or flashing lights. It came quietly, like a door closing in another room while everyone pretended not to hear it. Early morning. A knock measured, procedural, almost polite. Reeves answered in a robe he had owned longer than some of the detectives had been alive. He did not ask why they were there. He nodded once, as if confirming an appointment written years ago and never canceled. Word traveled faster than the truth ever had. By noon, Red Hollow was awake in a way it hadn't been since 2003. Phones buzzed. Storefront conversations stopped mid-sentence. A name, spoken for decades in half-phrases and caution, was finally said aloud without fear of superstition. Former neighbor. Maintenance worker. The man who fixed the fence. The man who waved but never lingered. The man now in custody. Headlines struggled to keep up with the weight of it. Texas 2003 cold case reopened. Arrest made after 21 years. Each word carried certainty the evidence still could not fully provide. Arrest is not resolution. Reopening is not closure. And cold cases do not warm evenly. In the interrogation room, Reeves sat with his hands folded, posture precise, eyes alert. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was to correct minor inaccuracies. Times. Distances. The color of the road at dawn. He remembered details the file did not. He did not remember Emily. Not directly. He referred to her as the girl. Once, the situation. Never her name. Investigators pressed carefully, threading questions through decades of silence. They spoke of opportunity, of isolation, of that narrow window when the town slept and one person did not. They spoke of evidence, not as accusations, but as facts that existed whether acknowledged or not. Reeves did not deny being near the access road. He did not deny working alone. He denied intention. Denied violence. Denied memory. I didn't hurt anyone, he said calmly. But I understand why you think I did. It was not a confession. It was not innocence. It was something in between, a space cold cases often occupy, the territory where truth refuses to take a single shape. Outside, Emily's family waded through a new kind of agony. This was not the sharp pain of loss they knew too well, but a dull, grinding uncertainty. An arrest invites hope. Hope invites fear. Fear asks a question no one wants to answer. What if this still isn't it? Prosecutors reviewed the case with surgical restraint. They saw the weaknesses immediately. Circumstantial links stretched thin by time. Evidence resurrected but not revived. Witnesses whose memories bent under cross-examination before they even entered a courtroom. Defense counsel prepared their narrative just as quietly. A life lived without conviction. A man convenient to blame. A system eager for resolution after decades of failure. Both sides knew the same truth. This case would not be decided by certainty. It would be decided by belief. As the weeks passed, the town slipped into a strange suspension. No trial date yet. No formal charges announced. Just the knowledge that something had shifted and could not be shifted back. People revisited old conversations in their minds, replayed moments they had dismissed. The night they saw a truck they didn't recognize. The time Reeves worked late without explanation. The way he watched more than he spoke. Memory became evidence, even when it shouldn't have. At the edge of Red Hollow, the access road remained unchanged. Same curve. Same scrub grass. Same silence. Cars still passed without slowing, unaware of the weight pressed into that stretch of asphalt. Emily's name returned to public spaces. Vigils. Murals. A scholarship fund announced quietly at the local high school. She was no longer just the missing girl. She was a person again, reclaimed from abstraction. And yet, in the end, the case resisted a clean ending. Legal motions delayed progress. Evidence was challenged. Timelines blurred. The past fought back against the present with everything it had. Reeves remained in custody, then did not, then did again, procedural shifts that felt like emotional whiplash to those watching. Each update brought relief followed immediately by doubt. Cold cases teach a cruel lesson. Answers are not guaranteed. Sometimes all you get is alignment, facts finally pointing in the same direction, even if they never converge into certainty. Sometimes the truth emerges not as a declaration, but as a shadow that refuses to disappear. Years after the arrest, people still ask what really happened in 2003. They ask if Reeves did it. They ask if Emily suffered. They ask if justice was served. No one answers the same way. But one thing is no longer disputed. Emily Carter did not vanish into nothing. Her disappearance was not random, not forgotten, not erased by time. The cold case did not solve itself. It cracked the silence. And in that fracture, uneven, unresolved, deeply human, the town learned to live with a different kind of truth. Not the comfort of closure, but the permanence of knowing that some questions echo longer than a lifetime. And that sometimes the most haunting sound is not the unanswered question, but the one that was finally asked too late. Time did not stop after the arrest. It never does. It simply changed texture. What followed was not resolution, but erosion, the slow wearing down of certainty, day by day, motion by motion. Court calendars filled, emptied, refilled. Motions were filed with language so careful it felt surgical, each word designed not to reveal truth but to control it. Evidence became a battlefield of definitions. What counted? What endured? What could survive the distance between 2003 and now? Reeves aged visibly in public view. The camera lenses caught it first. The slump of the shoulders. The weight settling into his face. He had lived 2 decades unnoticed, and now every movement was documented, parsed, replayed. He said little. When he did speak, it was through attorneys who spoke of rights and procedure and reasonable doubt. Inside the system, the case strained against its own history. Cold cases are fragile things. They look solid from a distance, but up close they are stitched together with compromise. Lost samples. Retired witnesses. Policies that no longer exist. Standards that changed midstream. Emily Carter's shoe, once the quietest object in the room, became the loudest. Experts argued over contamination pathways. Defense specialists spoke of secondary transfer, of industrial drift, of probability dressed up as certainty. Prosecutors countered with context, with rarity, with absence of alternative explanations. The jury had not yet been chosen, but the trial had already begun everywhere else. In diners, on message boards, in living rooms where people spoke in hushed tones, as if Emily could still hear them. The town fractured gently, not into sides, but into questions. Could a man live among them for 20 years carrying something that heavy? Could the system miss something that obvious for so long? Could both things be true at the same time? Cold cases do this. They do not divide communities cleanly. They unsettle them, rearrange them, force people to confront the distance between what they assume and what they know. Emily's family learned a new kind of waiting. They had waited for news before, but this was different. This waiting came with calendars and hearings and postponements. It came with hope measured in legal language, hope that could be sustained or extinguished by a single ruling. Her mother kept a folder now, not of memories, but of documents. Motions. Summaries. Timelines. She read them carefully, even when they hurt, even when they contradicted what she felt in her bones. Because belief, she had learned, is not enough. Across town, Reeves's house sat empty, the yard overgrown, the fence unrepaired for the first time in decades. Neighbors avoided it without meaning to. No one wanted to be the one seen looking too long. At night, Red Hollow returned to its old quiet. But it was no longer the same quiet. It was watchful, a silence aware of itself. The access road remained unchanged, but people noticed it now. They slowed there without realizing why. Some avoided it altogether. Others drove it deliberately, as if proximity might offer understanding. Nothing ever does. As months stretched on, the case narrowed. Some evidence fell away. Some held. Prosecutors adjusted their strategy, focusing less on a single smoking gun and more on accumulation, opportunity layered with pattern, presence layered with anomaly. A life examined backward. Reeves continued to deny wrongdoing. His statements never wavered, but they never clarified either. He spoke as though the truth were something external, something that had happened near him rather than because of him. "I can't give you what I don't have," he said once, quietly. No one knew what he meant. Psychologists weighed in. Journalists speculated. True crime podcasts reconstructed timelines with dramatic flair. Emily's name traveled farther in death than it ever had in life. And still, something essential remained missing. A moment. A bridge between evidence and certainty. Cold cases crave that moment, the single detail that collapses every alternative explanation, the confession, the witness who remembers, the object found where it should never have been. This case never offered it. Instead, it offered accumulation without climax. pressure without release. A truth that hovered just out of reach, close enough to shape lives, too distant to resolve them. As the trial date approached, the town braced itself. Not for an answer, but for an outcome. Those are not the same thing. Verdicts do not create truth. They declare an ending. And endings, in cases like this, are often administrative rather than emotional. Emily Carter's name would be spoken in a courtroom soon. Spoken carefully. Precisely. Surrounded by qualifiers and objections. Her life reduced to relevance, her absence to argument. Outside, the seasons turned again. Another year marked itself quietly. The cold case, once reopened, refused to close. Because some stories are not solved. They are carried. Carried by families who learn to live with questions. By towns that inherit shadows. By systems that do their best and fail anyway. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the transcripts and the headlines and the waiting, there remained a single, unresolved fact. On a night in 2003, a girl walked into the dark and did not come back. Everything else is interpretation. Everything else is aftermath. And the silence that followed her footsteps still stretches forward, unbroken, into the present, asking not what happened, but what we are willing to accept when certainty never arrives. The trial began without ceremony, the way most things of consequence do, no thunder, no revelation, just a room filling with people who understood that something irreversible was about to happen. Wooden benches. Neutral walls. The quiet choreography of procedure. Jurors sworn in with expressions that mixed curiosity and apprehension. They were not here to solve a mystery. They were here to decide whether the past could be proven. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Inside, the air felt compressed, as if the room itself understood the weight of 21 years pressing inward. The prosecution opened with restraint. No grand declarations. No promises of certainty. Just a timeline, laid out carefully, methodically, like a road drawn across a map already scarred by erasure. Emily Carter, age 17. Last seen walking along an access road near Red Hollow. A cold case that refused to stay buried. A man whose proximity never changed, even as the years did. They spoke of opportunity. They spoke of absence. They spoke of the way some crimes leave no witnesses, only alignment. The defense listened without interruption. When their turn came, they spoke of doubt with equal discipline. They reminded the jury of time, how it degrades memory, how it warps perception, how it turns coincidence into suspicion. They spoke of a system eager for resolution, a narrative assembled long after the fact. This is not a trial about what feels true, the defense said calmly. It is about what can be proven. The witnesses came slowly. Former detectives, now older, more careful with their words. Each admitted what had been missed, what had been assumed, what had been lost. Their honesty carried weight, but also vulnerability. Every admission of oversight cut both ways. Emily's friends testified next. Voices trembling, but steady enough to carry the memory forward. They spoke of a girl who planned for a future that never arrived. College brochures. Part-time jobs. Small arguments that felt enormous at 17 and meaningless now. Her mother took the stand only briefly. She did not narrate grief. She did not need to. The silence between her sentences said more than testimony ever could. When Reeves appeared, the room shifted. He looked smaller than people expected. Older. Less solid. The man in the chair did not resemble the shadow that had grown around his name. He answered questions carefully, precisely, as if each word were a fragile object. He acknowledged being near the access road. He acknowledged working alone. He acknowledged knowing Emily only in passing. He denied everything else. I did not take her, he said, evenly. I did not hurt her. I did not know what happened to her. The prosecution pressed. Circumstances tightened. Patterns emerged. Deviations from protocol. Anomalies explained away too easily. Still, no collapse came. No confession. No contradiction. No moment where the room gasped. Experts followed. Soil analysts. Behavioral specialists. Each added texture, but not finality. Every claim was met with a counter. Every conclusion met with an alternative explanation. The jury took notes. They watched. They waited for something definitive. It never arrived. Closing arguments arrived instead. The prosecution spoke of responsibility, not just legal, but moral. Of the unlikelihood of innocence surviving such alignment. Of the way truth sometimes appears not as a single fact, but as an accumulation that cannot be ignored. The defense spoke of restraint. Of the danger of filling gaps with belief. Of the obligation to resist the pull of narrative when evidence falters. Cold cases are tragic, they said. But tragedy is not proof. When deliberations began, the courtroom emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to leave the space where Emily's name had finally been spoken with authority. Hours passed. Then days. The jury returned with questions. Clarifications. Requests to review testimony. The system responded with procedure, but the tension crept outward.